Welcome to the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting. If you want effective and actionable tips to simplify the overwhelm of launching and managing your podcast, then this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Verity Songon, podcast manager, launch strategist, and host of a Top 100 podcast. I'm really excited to have you here, so without further ado, let's dive into the episode. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting. As ever, it is great to have you here. Welcome to everybody. If you are new to the podcast, if this is your first episode, and if you are returning, you've listened to episodes before, welcome to everybody. And as ever, it's great to have you here. I appreciate you being here. And just thank you for turning up, because it's you guys that really make this show what it is. In today's episode, I want to go through 4 podcast management tools with you, and they're ones that you might not necessarily expect. The great thing about each one of these tools that I'm going to talk about is that they are 100% free. So I'm not trying to sell you anything in this episode, but I am genuinely trying to just give you different options for management tools, which may or may not be useful for your podcast management workflow. Now, for me personally, I have used some of these in the past, some of them I'm still using, but I think that the more we can talk about the different resources and the different tools out there, the more options you have. If maybe you're using a tool at the moment, you're thinking this doesn't quite work for me, then you can check out something else as an alternative. So without further ado, let's dive in. I've done a few recordings where we've gone ever so slightly over the 10-minute episode line of the podcast. So we are going to try and stick to 10 minutes today. So the first one I want to talk about is Asana. The great thing about Asana is it does have a free plan. I have been using Asana for a couple of years now as a general project management tool, and I have never paid for Asana to date. So you can do an awful lot in the free plan. But from a podcasting point of view, what I love about Asana is that you can set up an entire workflow and you can do it different ways to really suit you and how you like to visualize your workflow. So you can create a project for your podcast, give it a name, and then you can have the different sections of your Asana set up. For example, episodes, guests, promotions, assets. You can set due dates. So it could be that you have the concept for the podcast episode. You're then going to set a due date to say when it needs to be recorded by. You can set a due date to say when you want to edit it by. You can move the little the little box which kind of symbolizes your episode task. You can move that between different columns, so you can see at a glance, oh, that episode's been edited, that episode hasn't, because of where the episodes are sitting on your dashboard, which I find really, really helpful in just really for tracking your progress. And you can do all of that in board view. So as I said, I really like Asana. I think it is great for keeping you on track with different tasks. And there are different alternatives. You've got HubSpot, for example. They've got a project management tool. You've got ClickUp. You've got Trello. There's a whole load of them, but I've used Asana, and out of all of them, that one is my favorite. So if you are looking for a project management tool, I would recommend Asana. On saying that, what I have been doing recently is actually having my project management for my podcast working from the Google Sheet. It took me probably about a day to set up the entire thing, because it's got some different formulas and what have you in it, and loads of drop downs and tick boxes and kind of date reminders and different things. So it took me about a day to actually set up exactly how I wanted it to look. But for me personally, this is working really, really well at the moment. And that's more because of the amount of content that is being created for the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting. It was easier for me to be able to keep track of everything in a Google Sheet, which is all color coded and does all sorts of weird and wonderful things, than in Asana. But that's just a little aside there. The other management tool, which I find absolutely brilliant, is Chartable or Podkite. Now, what these are is they are essentially analytic tools, and it is also gives you a smart link to be able to share to your listeners. And when they click on that smart link, they are taken automatically to their preferred podcast directory to be able to listen to your podcast, assuming that your podcast is on their preferred directory, that is. It makes it super easy and for people to then listen to your podcast if they are not necessarily, so when somebody sends you like a Spotify link and maybe you don't use Spotify to listen to your podcast, and then you have to bother to go to another podcast directory, look up that podcast. It's taking more and more of your time. You just don't really have, no one can be bothered with that in 2023. So to be able to have a smart link where you were just automatically taken to your favorite podcast directory it makes things so much easier. And the other great thing about Chartable and Podkite is they give you really detailed analytics if you are interested in seeing where you are charting globally within different categories of the podcast charts in a variety of different countries. So I love that, to be able to track analytics. And the other thing they do is you can monitor reviews within either Chartable or Podkite as well, because you don't need both. It's monitor reviews, so it can be a little bit frustrating when you have to go into Apple Connect to look at your Apple reviews and then go to Spotify to look at your Spotify reviews, go into it, you get the point. Whereas being able to log on to Chartable or Podkite, all of your reviews are just in one place, which again makes it so much easier to just be able to see what people are kind of doing and how they're interacting, how they're enjoying, and it makes it much more streamlined for you because you're not having to jump between all these different platforms. Okay, my third podcast management tool that I'm going to recommend is G Drive. So good old Google for cloud storage and file sharing. Generally, I use my G Drive to save everything to do with the Lazy Girls Guide to Podcasting. I've already said that I am currently using Google Sheets for planning out for the project management side of the episodes and blog posts, but every single episode in its edited format is saved in my G Drive. I've got all of my intros, my outros, because I do switch them up, or I've got plans to switch them up from time to time, but everything is stored in G Drive. And what I love about that is that it is just so easy that it doesn't matter if I'm on my laptop, if I'm on my phone, if I'm on my computer, I can just switch between everything and it's all just saved in the cloud. It's really easy to access. And also things like my podcast assets. So, the imagery, for example, for the podcast, and any imagery that I have of myself promoting on whatever social media platform, everything is just there, which is just, like I said, it's just easy. My fourth tool that I'm going to recommend is something called repurpose.io. I'm pretty sure I actually said at the beginning that all the ones that I was going to recommend are free. Repurpose.io is free, so apologies, completely forgot about that. But they do have a free plan and a free trial plan, so you can try it out. But basically, what Repurpose.io is you give it your RSS feed for your podcast, and then it can automate putting your podcast episodes onto YouTube. You can create a template for an audiogram and it just automates that onto YouTube every single time you create a new episode. You can also set it to automate throughout different platforms as well. So for example, if you put a reel on Instagram, then it will automate to immediately go out on YouTube Shorts and TikTok, for example. There's loads of different pathways you can set up. I'm not using this currently at the moment. I'm actually trying out Headliner as a separate tool. That's just because I like to try out different things so that I can review them, obviously, for the podcast and the blog. But Repurpose is so good if you want to have your podcast have a presence on YouTube. Maybe you're not doing the video and you just want it to be easy to put the audio on there with an audiogram. I would recommend checking out Repurpose.io. I can't remember the pricing off the top of my head, but it really wasn't that expensive. I want to say somewhere between $20 and $30 per month, but considering how much you get and like how much you can automate, then it really does end up paying for itself in terms of the amount of time that you get back from creating all of that separate content yourself. So those are my 4 recommendations for podcast management tools. Obviously, there are so many others out there, but I just wanted to go over those 4 tools. Let me know what you think of them. Do you use any of them? Do you have alternatives that you prefer? Let me know on either Twitter or Instagram. I would love to know your thoughts. And otherwise, I will see you next episode. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Lazy Girls Guide to Podcasting. If you love this episode, I think you'll love being on my email newsletter list, where I send out weekly podcasting tips to help you create, host, and grow a podcast that you love. To join, go to veritysongcon.com/newsletter or hit the link in the show notes. Until next time, happy podcasting.